Sandy Krebs, but you can call me Chef Viva Vegana. In these videos, I'll be sharing with you how anyone can make delicious vegan food. So, let's cook. Chef Viva Vegana here. Today I want to share my recipe for gluten-free, fat-free quinoa tabbouleh. This is by no means a traditional tabbouleh recipe. A traditional tabbouleh is made with bulgur wheat. It has olive oil and mint, and you see cucumber in a lot of tabbouleh recipes as well. Now, quinoa is a seed, not a grain or cereal, and is gluten-free. But I've read that people with celiac disease have to use caution when using quinoa. So I don't want to make any representations for people who suffer from celiac disease that this recipe would be okay for them. This is something that I do because I like to avoid gluten when possible. And this is just a really fast, easy recipe that I make all the time. In this recipe, it calls for only 1.5 cups of cooked quinoa, but I always make extra quinoa and just keep it in the fridge to pull out and use with stir fries or anything I would use rice for. Also, these tomatoes are coming from the same state that I live in right now. It's that time of year, but I've been known to use a can of diced tomatoes during the winter when the closest fresh tomato is coming from 3,000 miles away and a different hemisphere. I also will add fennel into this recipe, or sometimes a little bit of tarragon or basil. I just improvise with what I have fresh and on hand. And I hope you always feel free to improvise on my recipes too. They're just guidelines, not hard and fast rules. So all that said, let's cook. First things first, you always want to rinse your quinoa. So you'll pour it in a fine mesh strainer and just give it a quick rinse. A lot of packaged quinoa comes pre-rinsed, but it doesn't hurt to give it a quick rinse just to make sure. The powdery residue that naturally occurs on the quinoa can give it a bitter or even soapy taste if you don't remove it before cooking. The next thing you want to do is bring 2 cups of water to a full rolling boil. Then add 1/2 teaspoon of salt and the rinsed quinoa. Give it a quick stir. Cover it and turn all the way to low. And cook for 10 minutes. When the 10 minutes is up, take the quinoa off the heat and set aside for another 10 minutes. No matter how tempted you are to take the lid off and look, don't do it, because the cooking is only half done. After the 10 minutes is up, you can take the lid off and see if it needs some more time. No, that looks perfect. Sometimes there's a little more water that'll need to be absorbed. Oh, maybe it does need a couple more minutes now that I'm stirring it. Okay, so just put the lid back on and let it sit for another 10 minutes. And in that time, the water will definitely be completely absorbed. Okay, let's have a look now. Yep, all of the liquid is absorbed, so now we are in business. So what we're gonna do is take the quinoa and dump it in a larger bowl so that it can completely cool off before we use it. Now that the quinoa is completely cooled, I've taken a cup and a half of it out of the bowl and put it in the fridge to use for something else. And I'm gonna set this aside while I work on the vegetables. I have a full bunch of parsley here that I've washed. In this recipe, I am using a food processor. That's the quick and dirty part. And I'm just gonna take off these large parts of the stem, but since I'm using a food processor, I'm not going to bother to get the smaller parts of the stem out. We're gonna take one onion and quarter it. And then eighth it. And then I'm going to pull out the food processor. I found that this works best if you put the parsley on the bottom. So I'm just going to break it into a bit of smaller pieces here. And it's really important that you use a pulse and that you don't over process this. It can get away from you in just a second. So put it all in there, and literally you're just going to want to pulse it for a second. Open the lid, kind of move it around just to make sure the onion is evenly distributed in there, and give it another pulse. That's about ready. Any more and it really could get away from you, but I'm going to give it just one or two more little pulses. Okay, that's definitely done. So I'm going to put the parsley and onion in the bowl with the cup and a half of cooked quinoa. And I'll set that aside for a minute. The onions are making me cry. And then we're gonna dice the tomato. So you just want to cut the outside of the tomato off and leave the inside pulpy part. I always save that for soups or sauces or stocks. looks about right. That was 3 tomatoes, and that has yielded about a cup of diced tomato. And the last thing I'm going to do is add 1/3 of a cup of lemon juice and give it a quick mix. You may also want to add more salt in, or at this point, if you wanted to use olive oil or some cucumber or fresh mint, fresh fennel, this would be the time that you put in other ingredients. But that's it, my quick and dirty, gluten-free, fat-free quinoa tabbouleh. Thanks for watching. Please be sure to like and share my videos, and be sure to subscribe to my channel as well. And until next time, let's cook.